Hello, Americans. My name is Anthony Wall. WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News. They attached me to fake conversations with themselves and others when I was a kid and when I was an adult. They did this all at the same time where they were forcing a child abuser leader of kids. Collusion slash us with families with one's years apart. And faked conversations and ties to doctors with me when I was a kid and I was an adult. Increasingly, people from Hartford Hospital and next to them have families, foreign and domestic, with medicine but with badges, who have roles with planting predicate acts, and they have roles with home break-ins with the names involved with them. Also, time collusions also forced on themselves. They don't even know it with the people at corners of streets and next to schools, and they know it too to an extent. WTNH has people with the name O'Neill involved. They're leveraging overt criminal enterprises, private ones, people involved with forensics locations, Connecticut's prisons, and names on off the corrections offices and judicial branch offices. In conjunction into that, Department of Labor, there are proofs still because all around it, and there's an elderly home there involved too with multiple administrations. FBI Director Robert Luskin, his co-defendants and their family members have a Detective Dillon involved with people with untimely deaths at Trinity College. He forced my neighbors to collusions with others involved with that, like a Robert Rodriguez, or involved with other untimely deaths at the time. He's one of the one who also brought up collusions with them intercities with the campus's time and on my street trying to put fake. I didn't respond to him. I never had a word of verbal conversation with him in real life. I didn't respond to him when across the street 2 times he tried to plant evidences. I knew that. Then he confirmed on Facebook. Then they took my Facebook page. These are also people increasingly with the state judicial branch offices and conjunctions to it, like Weathersfield Pizza House. Weathersfield Pizza House has wire crimes of Weathersfield police and identity theft, fraud, slanders with a Joshua with a I forgot his name, Stephen Stocko. Stephen Stocko has rules with predicate acts of Weathersfield police that are switching names and forging names of child abusers. He also has collusions with many tied to and as former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved at Central Connecticut State University. Also with people named Carone, Kevin Carone and Mark Carone, per people named Perone and Kerr too, and others with the Weathersfield police and conjunctions to them and their intimate ties, all along the Sustain Highway, the Berlin Turnpike. The spots associated with them and their syntax has collusions of World Trade Center attack, predicate acts with WFSB, and their sources, and interbranch forging and switching names. These are the same names next to Fox Connecticut News. But Fox Connecticut News didn't attach me to fake conversations with themselves. I'm not sure. They just put all these fake things at the same time. It has something to do with their rules with Russians too. Per kids, when I was a kid, they were affected to make confessions to me, make it look like I had a conversation with them. Increasingly, that's one of the things tied to people I don't know at all who pretended other, involved with predicate acts before and after the World Trade Center attack. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, and the family members and intimate ties of Hartford courts. They gotten involved with a civil pro se RICO case, Racketeering Influence Corrupted Organization Act. The defendant in it, the defendant in that case was former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. Most of those cases are criminal, but this is civil. But there are criminal involved because both sides of that case, their family members, their neighbors, and the FBI director Robert Luskin, and multiple courts and people on the Connecticut judicial branch offices and corrections offices that have and have had roles with sequence shifts, all kinds of federal evidences crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and collusions of fake phone transcripts, fake ties and fake natures of ties between people, falsified police reports. Weathersfield Police Department involved with them too, with the Mendez Police, with the hallway of New Britain Superior Court, and with the court, and with them personally and professionally intercities, with the Wethersfield Police Department involved with sexual and medical offenders of all ages. They're doing sick things to keep people's mouths shut about how they have the elderly locked up, sickly distinctly at each place to keep all sickly non-distinctly from being discerned. So the sources of physicality, you guys were a certain type of victim / hyper victim that came through campuses sickly distinctly. I don't care if you came to the best campus, sickly non-distinctly too. You guys have roles replacing what our founders communicated about the breaching method, why and how they had to have that declassified for themselves, why and how they did not have free speech. No one did. Everyone had to pretend other to an extent, otherwise be censored, including if there were a majority of people, and that adapted to, including if it was a unity of countries. To pay attention to what was entrenched before America's founders were born. More than 13 colonies, and northern colonies and southern colonies, slavery was entrenched. So how America's founders get framed for it? One of the reasons is because our founders told us the only founder they had declassified for themselves and for us. The only founder they had the security to have us declassified for us to know the name of is James Madison. We were directed to understand that was his plan that forced at key locations, key figures, where everyone was forced to measure and maintain collusions against themselves and others syntactically, therefore physically, by internationally monitored conversations. The difference of their guilt roles with the hyperforeign or of the international companies or of the private and overt criminal enterprises only capable of being propagated by a hyperforeign and terrorists. And then America's founders were born. Everyone was roles with that. It came from before modern religious messengers were born. There are proofs that from off all campuses, they didn't want originally, and still no one wants it, but they have hyper additionally, right where no one wants collusion / S, per phenomena generated by the phenomenon of the hypersingular breaching method. When there are ways to discern it, just like there are ways to discern that one identity of value progression that is generating totally different species bodies and showing them each. It's not us nor them generating that. It is all things anyway. Its way and its system here valued, or it's a special difference forced away from here, not as death. This is how it shows us, but it longs this here. It is telling us to long water, not so we can go buy a plastic bottle, so we can get more plastic, more mercury into the ocean. The whole entire ocean has mercury in it. Apparently, in other words, in the fresh water, and like there was like a landscape. There was tactical. The Native American history in stages. They couldn't think that humanity would be so dumb. In other words, even when you know the whole ocean's polluted, but you still have forever chemicals in the fresh water. Even though we have all this might, better than free together, to move rivers. In other words, not seas, but rivers move to sea. The sea longs of rivers. You can see, in other words, but people, there are proofs that they took down a mountain where they're trying to put up the pyramids to replace it. Because and what's motivated that? Long before that, people that were going to get caught for internationally together, and then they colluded together against their own people, against themselves and nature itself, because they didn't want to get caught. So what they did was force, trick, hurt, and persuade. The only people who operate the names of countries A through Z, or the equivalent back then, semi-ancient times, I want to refer to it as, rather than ancient. But, ancient times. So they knew they were going to get caught. So they forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded people to respond to things that it did, hyper additional from that, and in a way that would get them to respond to that and leave that and miss that what they did, and it would simultaneously get innocent people hurt. And it knew also that it would get nature to demonstrate that, because that's nature's body, any body. Even if you make art, this hyper volume science is distinctly the order of the finite, or the value of the finite detail is distinct, and the value, but and everything shows us its distinct identity of relationship to itself, to the extent we could discern its individual identity of value progression, such as that way, like with the species volumes, a whole bunch of individual bodies that make up an individual species body. We have the same chlorides, different chlorides at the same time. Nature generates these communications to us. But we have things that nature communicates pretended by our campuses to be debatable. How they got away with this at countries A through Z, like in Russia and America, the military is breached. WFSB has military next to them since I was a kid, increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slings, planting evidence on all sides of my house and where they live and when. Put big conversations with me. I never had a conversation. These are people involved with victims advocates and people with New Britain Superior Court when I was a kid, involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and people still involved with sexual medical offenders of kids now as adults. And these are people also next to each of the campuses, planting evidence, fake ties, and fake natures, the ties to kids, fake motivations too. Their actual motivations. Everyone has motivations tied to this breaching method that are discernible. Also, everyone being sensed when we try to address that properly, including if we are a majority of people, including if we are united. You guys don't know how to speak for America's difference because you have replaced what James Madison communicated his plan was about. You went with the plan, because this is published, it says it was about a tea tax. It was about James Madison's plan. He counter-extorted people at key locations, gave them no means but to help. But too, he knew and everyone knew that the breaching method, how it worked. It was sickly, distinctly not northern colonies and southern colonies with slavery, but it was also sickly non-distinctly. And even though that hurt everyone, no one wanted rolls with it, except for Warehouse forced to have self-buy rolls with it. And that's tied to all instances and things. This only allows criminal enterprises to be self-hired in the cities as collusion /S with the names of the people of sciences too, shown by the breaching method. Even worse, they keep other things to others to self-blame. So they keep the odds to person that, put them in the database. And they're building fake ties to ignition where they go and have subject treatments. All sides of criminal and civil cases and interbranch originally and still. They have predicate acts with facts methods. Then they go and speak about crime anyway. Breaching method uses that to show them they can't afford to have discern. So they play, hear no evil, see no evil. Oh, don't. They have wire crime acts and methods where the agencies with the networks and the differences of guilt of the intelligence at the networks are next to them regarding their roles, fabricating phone transcripts as collusion /S with multiple natures of organized crimes at the same time, associated with Channel 3 News, with multiple child abusers, leaders of kids, years apart, first forced, and more of them being recorded also through the silence. And the people who went to my campus said, please help me, because I want to show you what's recorded. They put people that I never even saw around schools. And some may try to make fake, quick one exception. No, it was not even an exception. They're trying to make fake, but we're going to examine how they're using exception nature, and a special difference, tactical ulterior, as time collusions with a whole bunch of overt criminal enterprise, private ones and countries involved with methods like this. And they're pretending it's just their roles with unmarked police forms and the way they agree to do things, which is truth, but they're using those truths for lies. Relative right here where we could observe the collusions is where we could observe the breaching method. We have to because it is replaced right from the communications of James Madison and of nature itself at the same time. That's why we have black pupils, like whites of eyes left out. That's why no one will even allow another to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. It would have brought up James Madison's plan. It would have brought up why and how they did not have free speech and everyone had to pretend other. It would have brought up the internationally monitored conversations force, fake free speech force, and other pretended. Otherwise, that or role sensing the body who's trying to use syntax proper. Nature itself also is showing us a human fact should be nature breaching method is replaced from the communications of James Madison and with his plan. But even if you guys don't know that, nature itself shows us the things we do know about witch trials, abuses of Native Americans, helping them too, just to be. And the same thing with the difference of the colonists, hurt the colonists, help them. The difference between human differences, all through an differences systems tactical ulterior. The one that is showing is its distinct identity of difference, its distinct identity of simultaneous nature. Therefore, referred to by myself as the hyper simultaneous, I encourage us all to refer to it this way. Anyway, to understand this. Because it is discernibly hyper invisible, but still discernible distinctly from how it is invisible, but still discernible. And English was revealed to be taught this way. In many ways, boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are grouped. Also, a part of with the identity the sciences share. It is relativity / hyperrelativity. The parts of speech are about the invisible but still discernible, / hyper invisible but still discernible. For example, subjects, we could only appreciate them individually grouped into active ways and progressively and or simultaneously ways to an extent. And with means to study that, with that simultaneously where there's a further hyper simultaneous there, this further identity of value progression that is too finite some ways and is greater than some ways, and it was with active relativity to the extent / us we could discern, which we don't have to discern as far as we could discern for correlation. It shows us the different. It shows us correlation / hypercorrelation as a quality of diffusion that does not leave out, for example, black pupils, whites of eyes, communications, does not pretend. Oh, but that's my motive. That was my words. These are people also with the syntax regarding their subject treatments with their jobs and titles, and roles with the location / S uses that no one discerned. Then were forged further database identity relativities, collusion / S only allowed, the hyper additional, so they could have apparent and real motivations propagated to hide behind and through. At countries A through Z, the suburbs were designed to an extent before America's founders were born, for the torture of themselves, for the extortion of themselves, and for the slavery of themselves. Every one of the fact achieving nature-wise, therefore physically, every one of them. And that's why they had to force, trick, hurt, and persuade other people. The key figures at key locations have no ways to defend themselves unless they were going to rely on the unity forged. But just the unity, that's not what we have to agree. We have to get the Constitution unabridged. once any person can defend, logic and reason, legitimately, we all get free. Help Anthony. Get me off the fake conversations with WFSB. That we're going to examine. They have roles with other people with other countries, like named a bunch of people tied to a Scalora name. I never saw them on that street, but a bunch of people tied to them on Elm Street in Rocky Hill, like a house that was like boyfriends plural of and a cousin that reportedly, per intelligence in their sources, people of collusions with them forced. So they said that she had sexual relations with her cousin, Joe DeMoro, who's also involved with ongoing confessions and recorded leaking and pretending other, but all kinds of organized crimes and federal evidences crimes, identity thefts and frauds, evidences rackets with Connecticut's judicial and corrections offices, Wethersfield Police, and other police departments. A whole bunch of people named and tied to people named in conversations with people like Timothy O'Brien and Andrew O'Brien and their parents. Also have roles with lobbyists. I don't know what kind of lobbyists, but they're involved with differences rackets, with people with WFSB too, intercities, on and off the campuses with multiple child abusers, years of kids, years apart, and more recorded then and now recorded, but other natures of organized crimes with them. So it's better, in other words, that's also used where they use functionally, where they have types of crimes and their motivational, because they won't be, they have types of crimes and they're separating subjects in their collusion / yes with the organized crime methods and acts with facts. And then they want to go see who's lying. They can't afford to have communication. In other words, proper. They're planned. They already put fake. They switched names, forged names while they're collusion / us sticking fake transcripts, and with the federal agencies that have been breached because they have stayed breached. You guys have stayed collusion / yes, replacing what James Madison and our founders behind him and his plans communicated, and distinctly from George Washington. But no one had free speech. Remember that. You guys were supposed to allow people. You don't even allow other people to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. And you have relative delusions when you guys make subject treatments. It's not just in our country. The suits and ties count as exceptions. The camouflage, the EMS. EMS has rules with people named Leahy and the fire departments when they keep records on what they do and where they go and why they went there. That's increasingly their collusions with these other countries through war crimes too. Through wars, through the Civil War, through world wars, there have been staged hyper collusion / S with the breaching method and pretending other, being used remotely, doing that too. Oh, that's my job title. There you go. You learn how to speak for principles by the breaching method that taught you guys. Otherwise, it also, in other words, some things you learn through the breaching method because it's the thing that caused things and knew that nature was going to demonstrate things. It built styles, nature's needs of integrity, subject treatments, principle treatments, shown that they need to keep those things blamed on other things, others themselves, things that nature demonstrates. Why and how the suburbs look almost exactly alike in America, from America to Russia to Ukraine, even though there were homes built before America's founders were born, and there was a torture, extortion, slavery method role even, replacing what black people's whites of eyes would communicate while pretending other. As collusion / yes, a whole bunch of different countries involved at the same time. And even with the size of the case, what's the case is about, all these cases are connected because part of the hyper evidential is recorded, names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the interbranch and the intelligence tied to them and the news at the same time. They have the same federal evidences crime, sequence shift, self-value rolls with it, right? Where no one self-values it too. And we're going to observe how that's an effect that way. Many pray. What I caught them doing with this campus through time too, and all the campus with names next to it. So when people bring it up, in other words, I don't even know that, but it's recorded. These are the ones involved with interbranch and foreign and all sides of criminal and civil cases. And then time uses those same fakes years later has something to do with their roles with mayors and tied to them and the other ages and natures of politicians. This breaching method has subject treatments, value treatments, measured fake, self-valued roles, collusion/S with the names of the people of sciences, otherwise roles sensing that body. Oh, you're saying that? That's how many other things people said to prevent the hyper-evidential that we all know. Not fake, not real science spoke for New York City. You guys can't even speak for the suburbs properly because you were child abused. You came through campuses A through Z, the best ones to the worst ones. The difference of that was is also used by the hyperforeign to measure and maintain self-valued roles. With that not discerned, and with other things, others ourselves roles, forced to be blamed for things that our founders communicated for us to blame on the breaching method. You guys have self-valued roles until you discern this. Replacing right from the communications of James Madison, the human fact, tribute nature breaching method, that nature itself too shows us all those different laws, which trials, well, even if the which trials are made up, but why is they're right next to Webb House? And why did George Washington come there? The real answer, they still haven't told long. The real answer is because they had to counter-extort. They had to force everyone and until they had to get everyone's record straight syntactically. Because at the same time, with the internationally monitored conversations, again, rules even with black people's rights of slavery, everyone locked rules. That means with their syntax, their subject treatments the whole time, days go on, those instances, this predicate acts with facts, collusion/S, there are a whole bunch of collusions. It hides behind and through that. We're supposed to understand how to defend our presidents properly. We're supposed to forgiveness, for example, the kids are right to say, they're telling about the founders wrong. And they're pretending the people that aren't James Madison are our founders. And they have rules locking him into that thing. And they have rules sensing it too. Sensing for the breaching method, self-valued rules. Replacing what our founders, with James Madison communicated. But we're directed to understand how James Madison is the only founder that we know the name of. How they used his plan. And everyone had to lie about their actual motivations because they were being measured by internationally monitored conversations, by the sensibilities also of overt criminal enterprises, of private ones. Again, of all that associated, propagated by the breaching method, only allowed to be as systems tactical, as systems hyper additionally, and all humanity voicing as a system hyper additionally from its own, attack the military from its own, when its own nature's own, when nature's also positive onto itself, and not only itself as criminal insidiousness nature. I'm not a lawyer. Natural law is real. Black people is real. But not with body, but with soul. Behold, box sings, but makes no word, but prefers the shush sound, with exceptions. For example, so that's what's being demonstrated to us. It's not just it's the same body that is generating the species bodies of individual bodies. So all you have to do is appreciate this, and please help Fox News. Please help me here. I can't call you guys again because the wire crime acts and methods, mail crime acts and methods, falsified police reports, all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders. There are already all kinds of collusions with their patients and criminals forced since before they were caught. Overt criminal enterprise, private ones, are some involved with the same ones. That's a lot of lie progressions from those places. It's a lot of people needing to self-value throughout the world, with their jobs and things. You know, criminal and serious natures of positive and negative treatments, qualities of aspects of fact treatment nature, individually grouped and together being and having been valued, you know, improperly. How to defend our countries A through Z. This is why Tucker Carlton was child abused because he came through a campus that replaced, as the campus is A through Z, that replaced with James Madison communicated. But also FBI Director Robert Luskin has the name /S and one tied to them like a Phil Collo involved with predicate acts in my street with people at and next to Trinity College through time, with fire department people tied to a Aiello family planting evidences with a former Mayor Gold and other former mayors. I never had a class in my life. He didn't even go to my school with people that were involved with a former Mayor Gold. Increasingly, between campuses, planting evidences, sequence shifts, acting so other can make things and repeat big illusions, like acting because they're like falsified police report collusion roles. Their roles with names on the difference of guilt at or next to the locations, like the corrections and judicial branch offices. Increasingly with Whiting, with Weathersfield Pizza House. 2, Fox News. Please get them on paper, one name and sequence. They have all kinds of predicate acts with Weathersfield Police, with and fake conversation with me, fake ties, fake nature ties to me, collusions. I never saw a Marie Pazina on a campus in my life, and I never had a one word of a conversation with a Steven Stocko and with a Paul Zano and a Ray Collo recorded, involved with multiple child abusers, leaders of kids already tied to Steven Stocko. And former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and a bunch of people at Central Connecticut State University in Britain, Connecticut. They also at Weathersfield locations, and people associated with Weathersfield Pizza House have predicate acts with judicial branch offices, and people at next to campuses in their cities with a whole bunch of different countries and cover-ups because they're collusions with all natures of crime scenes, identity theft, fraud, slander, all kinds of medical corruption too. These are people with the houses and businesses next to Harvard Hospital, involved with names at next to campuses in their cities and in trust cities, also with Weathersfield Pizza House, with the Weathersfield Police forging and switching names, identity theft, fraud, slanders, falsified police report, fake conversations with me, fake ties to me, and increasingly people tied to a Steven Stocko, involved with people with the Board of Education too. I asked them to get. I was mad. I didn't ask right that person because I was their neighbor. Is the difference of guilt, like with the Pianza house and Pazina house and a Cell Civiello for them and a bunch of other people and people involved with the Cub Scouts. I had nothing to do with the Cub Scouts. I went one day. We sat there with them when he said they made like, and it was like no one doing it. And they were looking like they wanted me to leave. South Savino's neighbor. Increasingly, they're tied to a body dumping spot. That was the only time I ever saw him on campus. And then there was a kid from Tiger Cubs who increasingly keeps bringing them in with body dumping spots and people involved with child abusers, leaders, and kids years apart, and untimely deaths years apart, and murders that were brought up at the same time intercities. And one of the untimely deaths on the campus at Trinity College. Now, even if they made up any or all of this stuff, there were also recorded people collusions before the World Trade Center attack, with the attacking countries' identities and with our countries through other identities involved with it. A bunch of people tied to it, as in Eric Burgess, recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed, have roles with Hartford courts in the Britain Superior Court, with people with West Hartford and like a religious spot there too on New Britain Avenue and near West Farmers Mall. And these are with a bunch of people in a park, and who also has a bunch of people tied to it, Joseph Dennison and John Dennis, also with the confessions of a Rick Faglione, with their roles with spots like near Trinity College. I mean near Central Connecticut State University, all along Route 175. And at the end of it, there's a place involved with too. Confessions tied to judges and prosecutors involved with like people getting poisoned with food, and roles with other natures of organized crimes with the Brian Silver, and people who have been using the right to lie but they don't have the right to lie, and people who are collusions with proven child abusers, leaders of kids who have their own kids involved, and their extended family members of multiple courts, family members, and ones with the state judicial branch offices and corrections offices, all kinds of organized crimes and cover-ups per their roles with on a mass scale through our countries in Russia and America with psychiatry. In other words, all kinds of medical corruption. And it's also relative to where inside the nature of debates, there are quality aspects in nature that are relative because I caught you guys worse than criminally incompetent speaking to kids, black pupils, especially differentially. And we are all black, we have black pupils. In other words, even if we don't have eyes, nature shows us, even the birds, the fish, we are distinct, but we are non distinct from them. And we are simultaneous with them. And that's also hyper additionally, while it's showing us it's per that hyper additional, distinct identity of simultaneous nature that is generating totally different species bodies, each of them as an individual body. So we can discern its individual identity of value progression to an extent, and how it comes with its where it's equally valued with that extent is its complete identity relationship to itself, and only increasing value of that three ways, only increasing as value. This is hyper intelligence programming. You guys don't know how to speak about subjects, so how can you speak about artificial intelligence as a bridge, as as subject treatments in natures that couldn't defend themselves without valuing the Constitution being and having been abridged? And those quality aspects of fact treatment nature only having been heard. This is child abuse. This is elderly abuse. And this is middle age abuse multi-front. The identity theft, fraud, slanders are manifesting styles against each. But when anyone addresses it properly, we are sensed. You guys are not following mandated law. All you have to do is do that. In other words. Otherwise, you're just leaking too. Why do I have to keep begging you guys to get one of them onto paper into branch? They've been forging and switching names. They know I told you. I told you. No, we can't record the police. I knew they were going to record themselves. Then I started speaking about that, and they realized it. So they framed me 2 times, totally made up things about me, and forced me for a mental evaluation. Totally made up reasons why they did that, and they prevented me from reporting a rape that's involved with threats. That's involved with digital crimes with Hartford Hospital, involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and sexual and medical offenders of kids, roles that women judges and prosecutors and doctors, foreign and domestic, have at Hartford Hospital, and people tied to them, as the ones also time to use /S, something to do with the corners of the street at a grammar school I went to, increasingly tied to multiple child abusers, leaders of kids, families involved with it, intercities. But there's another one at that campus where his daughter was abused too. To have the difference of guilt, have it be whiting forensics too is increasingly involved. Also with Connecticut prisons like Sandy Hook Prison has increasingly involved with collusion/S with all kinds of natures of organized crimes and crime scenes and campuses used for a predicate acts with facts method/S, as we're going to observe this as. I'm not a lawyer, but hyper evidentially recorded is how lawyers are maintained criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrong, and needs and natures to pretend other styles, pretending other, as evidences while being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrong, collusion/S. This breaching method needs to hide nature, showing everyone that it has roles with everyone's motives when they speak. It has a human fact treatment nature breaching that has roles with your motive. If you try to get in the way with anyone trying to speak about black people's rights of eyes. And the breaching methods rolls with it. as you all do, or you are sensed. That's why you're sensed, and how people are motivated to that is relative to why what I caught them doing with the campuses and names at next to them. Kevin Harris is increasingly involved with names at and next to my kindergarten. I went off of Valley Crest Street, and people on Valley Crest Street increasingly tied to child abusers, leaders of kids, sexual, medical, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, has something to do with their roles with the military. But they're all just putting fake outcomes and transcripts when they set up little fake things. In other words, increasingly, a Mr. Abruzzi is also one of the ones that is one of the past educators involved at Central Connecticut State University, kids and adults. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Also, he has collusions also with the retired mayors and syntax where they're putting fake data into databases. And there are times use/s of that. Paul Kelly and others, like Mark Violet, sought me out. They have the to, I never saw him in my area ever. Paul Kelly. They have roles with a, 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 a Mazzucato bakery and where it is in Harper and where it is now, with a police chief Centron and with an O'Brien family, other families with the police departments intercities and names next to campuses, involved with wire, mail crime methods, falsified police reports, all kinds of identity thefts. Their roles with different countries, their roles with the kids of the adults involved with people from other countries, like Erin Murphy. She'll tell you, I never had a conversation with her, but there are also people who try to make her say fake things about me and complete other people's fake things. Increasingly, New Britain Superior Court has rules with them with sequence ships and people involved with, again, those things and other things at the same time, but body dumping spots totally different years apart and murders at the same time where I brought up all these other things I want to talk to you guys about and show you recorded hyper evidentially. At the same time, but you won't let me speak about any one of the things, including the World Trade Center predicate acts. And get, in other words, these are also people attaching little kids to fake ties to doctors, and then having those doctors, in other words, they're committing overt crimes, and they're having people rely upon them for their roles with use of location/s relative. So all along Ridge Road, there are people associated with federal evidences, crimes, identity theft, fraud, slanders, wire crime acts and methods, and fake motivations, planting and screening. All along Route 175 as conjunctions to it and to that has something to do too, including if that was made up for whatever reason. In other words, I'm not using the reporting about the girl reportedly dragged to her death from next to Hartford Hospital near there, all the way to the corner of Ridge Road and Jordan Lane, which is which is the southeast corner of Goodwin Park. Goodwin Park has a Joshua Schumacher and a Joshua Julian. It has a bunch of people tied to them with Wethersfield Police and the Britain Superior Court and campuses of Connecticut, including UConn, with sexual and medical offenders of kids. UConn has roles with Hartford Hospital. UConn and stores and other UConns have roles with Hartford Hospital, which warn the domestic military and fire departments, family members, overt criminal enterprise, private ones, people associated with the 9/11, 911 phones, and police departments that run into hide lab progressions at the same time. These are the same ones involved with prisons, with their prisoners and patients since before they were caught. Collusion/us with them. Enforcing that as collusion. Sandy Hook prisons have organized crimes with some of their prisoners before they were caught and people associated with them. And Whiting Forensics. Whiting Forensics also has people involved with the former Mayor Gold and his family members. He said a Lee Gold and there's a Debbie Gold. And he repeated he loved them. But I didn't say anything. I didn't respond. That was their roles also with the families involved with proven child abusers, leaders of kids years apart for first force. People from Hartford Hospital, they play after they put fake conversation. They have some guy on some patient of theirs. I don't know his name, but he's involved with the Wethersfield police and people that have been planting evidence on all sides of my house with him, and his doctor, which is also one of the names of a doctor, is brought up by Anthony Agman with confessions. He was forced to collusions but also sometimes self-valued with people with the name Eric Mendez and intelligence families with the corners of streets on Church Street in Old Wethersfield and with Southstein Highway and Two Rod Highway. They have all kinds of stacking federal evidences, crimes into databases, collusions with intelligence families, foreign and domestic there, though. They're hiding with that. The differences of their guilt, collusions, and delusions relative. Then we have to yell at you guys because, you guys can't make a subject treatment proper. You guys have recorded uses, collusion / that's all natures of investigators, and of perception. Oh, but we know about the 4P3 missile and you guys can't even explain James Madison, the first principle of how what we were trapped with. You guys have collusion / self-valued roles with our founders framed for slavery. And again, the only founder we know the name of is James Madison, and every single Native American. We know that too. Native American nature itself shows us it is hyper-native, and Native Americans are your founders. It doesn't say that, but it shows us. The president / chief does too. But you have to put it in context with James Madison's plan. Why and how they had to counter-extort key people inside less than, there were more than 13 colonies entrenched, and even slavery. Think about it. There's a torture, extortion, fact-cheating nature slavery rule /S. And I said rule because it is non-distinctly too. It was a breaching method that came from some ancient times. Prepare our minds. Ye human species body of individual bodies prepare to train. We are in a semi-ancient trap /S per a method by the /S part. But where we and how we can discern it and speak about it and appreciate it and overcome it with science and syntax. Therefore, physically, discernment of it comes through where there's collusion /S, including with the branches of government, the difference of their guilt or the intelligence tied to them, which, thank God, that countries A through Z, at least not one of them has had possession of their identity. Not one of them has been a patriot to nature. Not one of them has done other but only use all exception nature, like people who gave their lives for their country, to use that as an example to hide behind and through for the breaching method that uses them remotely. So you get them until you get everyone understanding why and how James Madison's our founder. That's what caused the American Revolution. You don't train a teacher to teach that it was about a tea tax, or make people even think it's debatable. Oh, we're trying to see who's that. No, when it's about while slavery was entrenched. See, right there, little kids have means to discern worse than the delusions of the experts, well-educated people. That's not where the swears come in, though. Swears have a lot of relativity to where and how. Investigators, all sides of criminal and civil cases, interbranch in their sources, their family members too, in the intelligence types, the difference of their guilt, the news at the same time. They already put the same sequence shifts, the same criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, collusion /S, with self-value, criminal and ceaseless natures of positive treatments, negative treatments, keeping the identity of relativity from us worse than obfuscated, as collusion /S too, to keep it obfuscated in the future too. And that's just how things were in the past. You guys, past is still, you guys having debates. You have debates about sexually themed at campuses, and counters to it as collusion slash yes, with all kinds of natures of organized crimes at the same time, and being used to measure and maintain self-value. Collusion, they incompetent, worse than criminal incompetence with the law, all except or collusion slash S self-value rules, all exception nature, use fake as fakes, as the names of the people of science, is that countries A through Z. We're child abuse to keep them. Yes, we're child abuse with other communicators than this for James Madison and for our founders, plural. Native American and those colonists with James Madison and them. Even if they didn't know about the plan, the Native Americans helped it. It made the nature of because everyone wants to get ourselves on an unabridged constitution nature. Not even just Americans. But why one's the only people allowed to speak for names or to be heard using America's name, using other countries' names, are people that collusion slash us with different uses, collusions, and styles, needs, and natures they need to pretend other. The breaching method shows them that. A part of where and how it keeps people and natures of identities of experts reliant upon forcing other things, others ourselves, to be blamed. Right where and how we're supposed to be blaming the human factor be nature breaching method. Replaced right from James Madison's communications. Replaced right from nature showing us. It's one of the things that all those crazy laws were about and are about simultaneously. And that shows us the value of the Constitution unabridged. Vaccines. Vaccines.